It didn't happen all at once. That's the first thing people get wrong about betrayal. It starts small, almost invisible. A laugh that lingers too long. A glance that shouldn't mean anything but does. A silence that suddenly feels intentional. I saw it all. Every moment. Every shift. Every tiny crack forming in my marriage. And the worst part? The man responsible wasn't a stranger. He was family. My cousin. If you met him, you'd understand why I didn't see it coming sooner. Everyone liked him. That's not an exaggeration, it's a fact. He had this effortless charm. The kind that made people lean in when he spoke, laugh a little louder at his jokes, forgive him before he even made mistakes. Even me. Especially me. We grew up together. Same streets. Same holidays. Same stories repeated at every family gathering until they stopped being stories and just became identity. So when I invited him into my home, it didn't feel like a decision. It felt natural. Safe. Normal. And my wife. She loved him too. Not like that. At least, not at first. She was warm by nature. That was one of the things I fell in love with. She made people feel seen. Heard. Important. It's easy to confuse that kind of warmth for something deeper when you want to. But I didn't. Because I trusted her. Fully. Completely. Without hesitation. The first moment that felt off? It wasn't dramatic. No music. No tension. No obvious betrayal. Just a look. We were sitting in the living room. Nothing special. Just one of those evenings that blur together over time. He said something, I don't even remember what. She laughed. But she didn't look at me. She looked at him. And the laugh stayed a second too long. Just long enough for something in my chest to tighten. Then it was gone. Everything went back to normal. Conversation moved on. No one noticed. Except me. I told myself I was overthinking. Because what else could it be? They were family. And she was my wife. There are lines you don't even imagine people crossing. Not because they can't. But because believing they would feels ridiculous. But then the moments started stacking. Small. Harmless. Easy to dismiss individually. Together? Different story. They developed a rhythm. Private jokes I wasn't part of. Little references that passed between them like coded messages. I'd ask, "What's that about?" And she'd smile. "Oh, nothing. Just something from earlier." Earlier when? I was there all day. Then came the interruptions. I'd be talking, and she'd cut me off, not rudely, just subtly. To respond to him. To laugh at something he added. To redirect the attention. And it wasn't constant. That's what made it dangerous. If it was obvious, I would have reacted. But it wasn't. It was just enough to feel off. Not enough to accuse. Then there was the distance. That was harder to explain. Because nothing changed on the surface. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings. Still asked about my day. Still sat next to me at night. But something underneath it all shifted. Like she was present, but not fully there. Like part of her attention had been quietly reassigned. And I couldn't prove it. I could only feel it. One night, I tested something. Not consciously. Not at first. We were all sitting together again. Same couch. Same routine. And I said something deliberately uninteresting. Just to see. She nodded. Gave a small hum. Didn't really engage. Then he spoke. And her whole face changed. Eyes brighter. Smile wider. Body leaning slightly toward him. Not obvious. But undeniable. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. It wasn't that they were doing anything, yet. It was that they were becoming the kind of people who would. And once that thought entered my mind, everything started to make sense. The way her phone tilted slightly away from me sometimes. Not hidden. Just angled. The way his visits became more frequent. But always with a reason. I was in the area. Just thought I'd stop by. Didn't want to eat alone. Reasonable. Always reasonable. That's how it works. And the worst part? They weren't nervous. They weren't careful. Because in their minds, there was nothing to hide. Not yet. That's what people misunderstand. Betrayal doesn't begin with action. It begins with permission. Silent. Internal. Justified. And once that permission is given, the rest is just timing. I didn't confront them. Not then. Because I didn't have proof. Only patterns. And patterns can lie. But instincts? They rarely do. So I watched. Closer now. More aware. More patient. Those brief, almost imperceptible gaps where something unspoken lived. Where meaning existed, without words. And in those pauses, I found the truth. Not proof. Not yet. But direction. Because by then, I wasn't trying to understand if something was happening. I was trying to understand when it would. And here's the part that changes everything. The moment most people expect anger? Rage? Explosive confrontation? That never came. Because by the time I knew for sure, I wasn't angry anymore. I was thinking. Control replaces reaction. The thing about truth is, it rarely announces itself. It doesn't kick down the door or demand attention. It slips in quietly. Almost politely. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. For me, it wasn't a dramatic discovery. No lipstick on a collar. No late-night confession. No obvious mistake. Just a message. Simple. Ordinary. Devastating. She left her phone on the kitchen counter. That alone wasn't unusual. We didn't have secrets. Or at least, we used to not have them. The screen lit up. I wasn't even trying to look. Not at first. But the name caught my attention. His name. And the message preview? Just one line. You shouldn't have looked at me like that today. That was it. No explanation. No context. Just implication. Heavy. Unmistakable. I didn't pick up the phone immediately. That's important. Because something in me paused. Not out of hesitation, but out of understanding. This was the moment. The line. The point where everything shifts from suspicion to certainty. When I finally picked it up, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't nervous. I was calm. Unnaturally calm. Their conversation wasn't long. That's what made it worse. It meant this wasn't new. This was just what they hadn't bothered to delete. Fragments. Hints. Carefully worded messages that said everything, without saying anything directly. Today was risky. I think he noticed something. He didn't. He never does. That last one? That one stayed with me. He never does. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. But because of how wrong it was, I put the phone back exactly where it was. Same position. Same angle. Same illusion of safety. And then I stepped back. Not physically. Mentally. Because in that moment, something inside me changed. The pain came first. Sharp. Immediate. Like something tearing under the surface. Then it faded. Faster than it should have. Replaced by something colder. Quieter. More controlled. Clarity. I started seeing everything differently. Not emotionally. Strategically. Their behavior. Their patterns. Their assumptions. Because now, I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew. And knowing does something dangerous. It removes doubt. But it also removes hesitation. I watched them again that evening. Same living room. Same positions. Same routine. But now, I wasn't part of the scene. I was observing it. She laughed at something he said. Again. That same lingering laugh. But this time, I didn't feel anything. No jealousy. No anger. Just confirmation. He avoided my eyes briefly. Subtle. But noticeable. Because now, there was something to hide. And the shift in their behavior? It was immediate. Not obvious to anyone else. But to me? Clear as day. They thought they were being careful. More measured. More controlled. But they weren't hiding anything. They were just hiding it from the man I used to be. The one who trusted without question. The one who dismissed instincts. The one who believed loyalty was permanent just because it was promised. That man? He was gone. In his place. Someone else was paying attention. And here's where most people get it wrong again. They think this is where the confrontation happens. The shouting. The accusations. The dramatic unraveling. But no. Because confrontation ends the game. And I wasn't ready for it to end. Not yet. Because now, this wasn't about catching them. I already had. This was about understanding them. Completely. What they thought. What they assumed. What they were planning. And more importantly, what they weren't prepared for. So I did the one thing they never expected. Nothing. I didn't change my behavior. Didn't ask questions. Didn't create tension. I became predictable. The same man they believed I was. Trusting. Unaware. Safe. And in that safety, they relaxed. Not immediately. But gradually. Carefulness faded. Confidence returned. Because in their minds, they were in control. But control is a fragile illusion. And the moment you believe you have it completely is usually the moment you've already lost it. I started noticing more. Not because they became reckless, but because I became precise. The timing of his visits. The way she checked her phone before responding. The slight delay before answering certain questions. Everything had a pattern. And patterns can be used. By the time the truth fully settled in, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I wasn't even surprised. I was focused. Because they thought this was just a secret. A hidden relationship. Something they could manage quietly. They had no idea. They had already walked into something much bigger. And I hadn't even made my move yet. I didn't confront them. That's the part most people don't understand when I tell this story. They expect shouting. Glass breaking. A man losing control in the middle of his own home. But anger is loud. And loud people make mistakes. I couldn't afford mistakes. So I did something far more dangerous. I stayed quiet. That night, after I saw it, after I knew, I didn't storm in. I watched. From the hallway. From the silence between their laughter. From the way her voice softened when she spoke to him. But sharpened when she spoke to me. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. Over the next few days, I didn't accuse. I observed. I started noticing things I had missed before, or maybe things I had ignored because they didn't fit the version of reality I preferred. He stayed longer than necessary. She checked her phone more often when he was around. There were conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. Small things. But betrayal doesn't arrive as a storm. It builds like pressure. Quiet. Invisible. Until something breaks. I adjusted. Not emotionally. Strategically. I stopped reacting to them as people and started studying them as patterns. What triggered her attention? What fed his ego? What made them careless? I watched how he carried himself, like someone trying to prove something he hadn't yet earned. Too eager. Too loud. Too quick to impress. And her? She responded to it. Not because he was better. But because he was different. New attention. New energy. New validation. People don't always chase better. They chase different. That's when I understood something deeper. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about me. It was about them. Their weaknesses. Their insecurities. Their need for something they couldn't define. And once I saw that, everything became clear. I created rules. Not for them. For myself. Because emotion is unpredictable. And unpredictability ruins precision. Rule number 1: no confrontation. Confrontation would force them to hide. And I didn't want them hiding. I wanted them exposed. Not publicly. But behaviorally. I needed them comfortable. Careless. Predictable. Rule number 2: no exposure. Not yet. Because exposure ends the game too early. It gives them consequences before they've fully revealed themselves. And I wasn't interested in catching them. I was interested in understanding them. Completely. Rule number 3: no emotion. This one was the hardest. Because every instinct I had wanted to react. To ask her why. To ask him how. But questions give people power. They let them shape the narrative. And I didn't want a story. I wanted the truth. Unfiltered. Unmanaged. So I removed myself emotionally. Not physically. I was still there. Still present. Still playing the role. But inside? I was gone. And then I started documenting. Not dramatically. Not obsessively. Quietly. Systematically. Times. Dates. Changes in behavior. Patterns in communication. I wasn't collecting evidence for a confrontation. I was building a map. A psychological blueprint. That's when I saw him clearly for the first time. Not as my cousin. Not as the man sitting at my table. But as who he really was. He wasn't confident. He was performing confidence. The kind that cracks under pressure. He talked about big plans, but never followed through. He chased validation, but couldn't sustain it. He needed people to believe in him. Because he didn't believe in himself. Greedy. Not just for money. For attention. For status. For recognition he hadn't earned. Insecure. Every joke he made had an edge to it. Every compliment he gave was slightly exaggerated. Like he was constantly trying to stay relevant in a room he didn't belong in. And most importantly, desperate. Desperate to become something. Anything. Because where he was? Wasn't enough. That was the key. Not the affair. Not the betrayal. Him. Because people like him don't need to be destroyed. They collapse on their own. All they need is direction. I remember sitting alone one night, replaying everything in my head. Every interaction. Every glance. Every moment I had once dismissed. And I said it out loud. Quietly. Almost calmly. I realized something that night. Beat. I didn't need to destroy him. Beat. I just needed to let him become himself. That was the moment everything changed. Because revenge stopped being emotional. And became architectural. I wasn't going to fight him. I was going to build something around him. Something he would willingly climb. Something he would believe was his success. And when it collapsed, it wouldn't feel like revenge. It would feel like consequence. So I made a decision. Not impulsively. Not out of anger. But with clarity. Precision. Patience. So I decided. Beat. I would help him. Helping him was easier than I expected. Because he already wanted it. All I had to do was become the person he needed me to be. Supportive. Encouraging. Invested in his growth. The cousin who believed in him. It started small. Casual conversations. Have you thought about taking that idea seriously? I know someone who might be able to help you. You just need the right opportunity. Simple words. But for someone like him? They landed like fuel. Because people who are desperate to become something are always waiting for someone to validate the illusion. He started opening up more. Telling me his plans. His visions. The life he believed he deserved. And I listened. Carefully. Not to support him. But to understand where he wanted to go. Because once you know someone's destination, you can control the path. That's when I made my first move. I introduced him to an opportunity. A small one. Low risk. Just enough to build trust. A contact of mine needed help with a short-term project. Nothing major. But it sounded important. Looked important. Felt like progress. He took it immediately. Of course he did. And more vocal. More reckless. And my wife? She noticed. I saw it in the way she looked at him now. Not just curiosity. Admiration. Because success, real or perceived, is magnetic. He wasn't the same man anymore. At least not on the surface. And that made him more attractive. More convincing. More dangerous. Exactly what I needed. Because the higher he climbed, the further he would fall. And then it happened. The breakthrough. A real opportunity this time. Not small. Not controlled. Big enough to change his life. A business deal. A partnership. Something that could actually make him what he had always pretended to be. He came to me with it. Excited. Nervous. Desperate for approval. What do you think? He asked. And I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man he had become. At the man I had helped create. And I smiled. Slightly. Take it, I said. Because I already knew something he didn't. This wasn't his success. It was his test. And he was going to fail it. Badly. He didn't become successful overnight. That's what made it believable. That's what made it dangerous. At first, it was small. A business idea he mentioned casually. Something about import deals, electronics, accessories. Low risk, high turnover. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct him. I leaned in. Sounds solid. That's all it took. Success isn't always built on intelligence. Sometimes, it's built on validation. And I gave him just enough of it. Weeks passed. Then months. And slowly, things started to shift. He got his first win. A small one. But he made sure everyone knew. Posted it. Celebrated it. Repeated it. And I watched something subtle happen. Not in his bank account. But in his posture. He stood straighter. Spoke louder. Started finishing sentences that didn't need finishing. Confidence is addictive. Especially when it's new. Beat. Then came the second win. Bigger. Cleaner. More visible. That's when people started calling him smart. Focused. Different. And here's the thing about people like my cousin. He didn't want money. He wanted recognition. So I gave him something better than advice. I gave him agreement. Every idea? Yeah, that makes sense. Every risk? I'd probably do the same. Every doubt? You're overthinking it. Beat? And just like that, he stopped questioning himself. That was the moment he became predictable. Because when a man stops questioning himself, he starts believing he can't be wrong. Shift. Introduce wife. And my wife. She noticed. Of course she did. Success has a smell. It lingers. It attracts attention. At first, it was innocent. Questions. Curiosity. Support. How's his business going? He seems really focused lately. You should be proud of him. I nodded. Agreed. Encouraged it. Because proximity creates emotional shortcuts. Soon, conversations became longer. Laughter became easier. Silences became comfortable. And I didn't interfere. That's important. I never interfered. Then came the second win. Bigger. Cleaner. More visible. That's when people started calling him smart. Focused. Different. And here's the thing about people like my cousin. He didn't want money. He wanted recognition. So I gave him something better than advice. I gave him agreement. Every idea? Yeah, that makes sense. Every risk? I'd probably do the same. Every doubt? You're overthinking it. And just like that, he stopped questioning himself. That was the moment he became predictable. Because when a man stops questioning himself, he starts believing he can't be wrong. And my wife. She noticed. Of course she did. Success has a smell. It lingers. It attracts attention. At first, it was innocent. Questions. Curiosity. Support. How's his business going? He seems really focused lately. You should be proud of him. I nodded. Agreed. Encouraged it. Because proximity creates emotional shortcuts. Soon, conversations became longer. Laughter became easier. Silences became comfortable. And I didn't interfere. That's important. I never interfered. Because interference creates resistance. But space? Space allows things to grow. And what was growing was exactly what I needed. Meanwhile, his success kept climbing. New deals. New contacts. New circles. He started dressing differently. Talking differently. Walking into rooms like he belonged there. And people believed him. Because confidence, when unchallenged, becomes authority. But something else changed too. Something quieter. More dangerous. He stopped listening. Advice became optional. Opinions became irrelevant. Except mine. Mine, he trusted. Not because I was smarter, but because I never opposed him. I became the safest voice in his world. And the safest voice is the most dangerous one. Then came the risks. Bigger deals. Faster decisions. Less verification. And every time he hesitated, I was there. You're thinking too small. Opportunities like this don't wait. You've earned this level. Notice something? I never pushed. I reflected. I simply turned his thoughts into certainty. And he loved me for it. My wife started seeing him differently. Not just as family. Not just as someone familiar. But as someone becoming something. That's a powerful shift. Because people don't fall for others overnight. They fall for momentum. And he had it. They started sharing ideas. Talking about growth. About vision. About future. Things we used to talk about. And I let it happen. Because loss, when it looks real, makes the audience uncomfortable. And I needed them uncomfortable. I needed them asking the same question. Is he actually losing? Meanwhile, I slowed down. Intentionally. Fewer moves. Less visibility. Less presence. To everyone watching, it looked like I was being left behind. Even she noticed. You've changed. You're not as driven as you used to be. I didn't argue. Because perception is a tool. Let them believe I was losing. Because the man who looks like he's losing is the one no one watches. And I needed no one watching. By the time he hit his peak, he wasn't the same person anymore. He was louder. Sharper. More dismissive. Grateful? No. Entitled. He interrupted people. Corrected people. Dismissed opinions without listening. And the worst part? He believed he had earned the right to do it. That's when I knew. We were ready. Because success doesn't reveal who you are. It removes the need to hide it. And what he had been hiding was finally visible. Greed. Insecurity. Hunger for validation. All amplified. All exposed. All usable. Then one night, he came to me with an idea. Not a small one. A massive move. High risk. High reward. The kind of decision.
Less verification. And every time he hesitated, I was there. You're thinking too small. Opportunities like this don't wait. You've earned this level. Notice something? I never pushed. I reflected. I simply turned his thoughts into certainty. And he loved me for it. My wife started seeing him differently, not just as family, not just as someone familiar, but as someone becoming something. That's a powerful shift, Because people don't fall for others overnight. They fall for momentum. And he had it. They started sharing ideas, talking about growth, about vision, about future, things we used to talk about. And I let it happen. Because loss, when it looks real, makes the audience uncomfortable. And I needed them uncomfortable. I needed them asking the same question. Is he actually losing? Meanwhile, I slowed down, not intentionally. Fewer moves, less visibility, less presence. To everyone watching, it looked like I was being left behind. Even she noticed. You've changed. You're not as driven as you used to be. I didn't argue. Because perception is a tool. Let them believe I was losing. Quiet, sharp line. Because the man who looks like he's losing is the one no one watches. And I needed no one watching. By the time he hit his peak, he wasn't the same person anymore. He was louder, sharper, more dismissive, grateful. No. Entitled. He interrupted people, corrected people, dismissed opinions without listening. And the worst part? He believed he had earned the right to do it. That's when I knew we were ready. Because success doesn't reveal who you are. It removes the need to hide it. And what he had been hiding was finally visible. Greed, as insecurity, hunger for validation, all amplified, all exposed, all usable. Then one night, he came to me with an idea, not a small one, a massive move, high risk, high reward, the kind of decision that changes everything. He laid it all out, numbers, connections, shortcuts, and for the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in his voice, a hesitation. Do you think I should do it? That moment was everything, because that question was the last line between who he was and who he was about to become. I looked at him, paused, just long enough. Then I smiled. Honestly, if it were me, I wouldn't hesitate. Silence. Decision made. And just like that, he stepped forward. Didn't realize. It wasn't a step up. It was a partnership. Something that could actually make him what he had always pretended to be. He came to me with it, excited, nervous, desperate for approval. What do you think? He asked. And I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man he had become, at the man I had helped create. And I smiled, slightly. Take it, I said, because I already knew something he didn't. This wasn't his success. It was his test, and he was going to fail it, badly. He didn't become successful overnight. That's what made it believable. That's what made it dangerous. At first, it was small. A business idea he mentioned casually. Something about import deals, electronics, accessories. Low risk, high turnover. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct him. I leaned in. Sounds solid. That's all it took. Success isn't always built on intelligence. Sometimes it's built on validation, and I gave him just enough of it. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, things started to shift. He got his first win, a small one, but he made sure everyone knew, posted it, celebrated it, repeated it. And I watched something subtle happen, not in his bank account, but in his posture. He stood straighter, spoke louder, started finishing sentences that didn't need finishing. Confidence is addictive, and especially when it's new. Then came the second win, bigger, cleaner, more visible. That's when people started calling him smart, focused, different. And here's the thing about people like my cousin. He didn't want money. He wanted recognition. So I gave him something better than advice. I gave him agreement. Every idea? Yeah, that makes sense. Every risk? I'd probably do the same. Every doubt? You're overthinking it. And just like that, he stopped questioning himself. That was the moment he became predictable. Because when a man stops questioning himself, he starts believing he can't be wrong. And my wife, she noticed. Of course she did. Success has a smell. It lingers. It attracts attention. At first it was innocent. Questions, curiosity, support. How's his business going? He seems really focused lately. Ah, you should be proud of him. I nodded, agreed, encouraged it. Because proximity creates emotional shortcuts. Soon conversations became longer. Laughter became easier. Silences became comfortable. And I didn't interfere. That's important. I never interfered. Because interference creates resistance. But space? Space allows things to grow, and what was growing was exactly what I needed. Meanwhile, his success kept climbing. New deals, new contacts, new circles. He started dressing differently, talking differently, walking into rooms like he belonged there, and people believed him. Because confidence, when unchallenged, becomes authority. But something else changed too. Something quieter, more dangerous. He stopped listening. Advice became optional. Opinions became irrelevant. Except mine. Mine. He trusted. Not because I was smarter, but because I never opposed him. I became the safest voice in his world, and the safest voice is the most dangerous one. Then came the risks, bigger deals, faster decisions, less verification. And every time he hesitated, I was there. You're thinking too small. Opportunities like this don't wait. You've earned this level. Notice something? I never pushed. I reflected. I simply turned his thoughts into certainty. And he loved me for it. My wife started seeing him differently, not just as family, not just as someone familiar, but as someone becoming something. That's a powerful shift, because people don't fall for others overnight. They fall for momentum. And he had it. They started sharing ideas, talking about growth, about vision, about future, things we used to talk about. And I let it happen, because loss, when it looks real, makes the audience uncomfortable. And I needed them uncomfortable. I needed them asking the same question. Is he actually losing? Meanwhile, I slowed down, not intentionally. Fewer moves, less visibility, less presence. To everyone watching, it looked like I was being left behind. Even she noticed. You've changed. You're not as driven as you used to be. I didn't argue. Because perception is a tool. Let them believe I was losing. Quiet, sharp line. Because the man who looks like he's losing is the one no one watches. And I needed no one watching. By the time he hit his peak, he wasn't the same person anymore. He was louder, sharper, more dismissive, grateful. No, entitled. He interrupted people, corrected people, dismissed opinions without listening. And the worst part? He believed he had earned the right to do it. That's when I knew we were ready. Because success doesn't reveal who you are. It removes the need to hide it. And what he had been hiding was finally visible. Greed, as insecurity, hunger for validation, all amplified, all exposed, all usable. Then one night, he came to me with an idea, not a small one, a massive move, high risk, high reward, the kind of decision that changes everything. He laid it all out, numbers, connections, shortcuts, and for the first time, There was a flicker of doubt in his voice, a hesitation. "Do you think I should do it?" That moment was everything, because that question was the last line between who he was and who he was about to become. I looked at him, paused, just long enough. Then I smiled. Honestly, if it were me, I wouldn't hesitate. Silence. Decision made. And just like that, he stepped forward. Didn't realize. It wasn't a step up. It was a step off the edge.
It didn't fall apart immediately. That's not how real damage works. It starts with things that are easy to ignore. A delay. A number that doesn't quite add up. A call that doesn't get returned. Small things. Forgettable things, unless you're looking for them. I was. The deal went through, exactly like he planned. At first, it looked like a win. Money moved. Connections strengthened. Visibility increased. From the outside, flawless. But inside, tiny fractures had already formed. Because shortcuts don't remove risk. They just delay. The first issue was minor, a discrepancy in cost projections. He noticed it, paused, then dismissed it. Just a calculation error. He adjusted the numbers, moved things around, made it fit. And that's the moment. The pattern began. Because once you justify a mistake, you make it repeatable. Now, the second issue came faster. A partner backed out, quietly, unexpectedly. He didn't tell anyone at first, tried to handle it internally, rearranged resources, pulled strings. And then he came to me. Not for advice, for confirmation. "This is normal, right?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, happens all the time at that level." Relief. That's what I gave him. Not solutions, not clarity. Relief. And relief, it keeps people from correcting course. My wife started picking up on it. Not the details, but the energy. Something was off. He seems stressed. He's not as confident lately. I nodded. Pressure comes with growth. Simple, believable, and just enough to keep her from digging deeper. Instead of slowing down, he accelerated. That's what people do when they feel instability. They try to outrun it. Bigger moves, faster decisions, and less verification. And every time he explained his next step, I did the same thing. Agreed, validated, encouraged. You're thinking ahead. Most people wouldn't see this. You're operating on a different level now. Notice the pattern? I didn't push him into risk. I made risk feel like identity. And once risk becomes identity, walking away from it feels like failure. So he didn't walk away. He ran deeper into it. Then came the first real problem. Public, visible, impossible to ignore. A transaction failed. Not small, not private. Public enough for people to start asking questions. And questions are dangerous when you've built your image on certainty. He tried to explain it. Blamed timing, blamed logistics, blamed external factors. But something had changed. People weren't nodding anymore. They were watching. Behind the scenes, it was worse. Numbers weren't aligning, promises weren't holding, timelines were slipping. And for the first time, he didn't look confident. He looked reactive. That's when I stepped in again, not to fix it, to stabilize his ego. You've come too far to panic now. This is where most people fold. You're not most people. You just need to push through. And he believed me. Because I had never been wrong before. At least, that's what he thought. My wife started pulling back. Not dramatically, subtly. Fewer conversations, less enthusiasm.
More questions. Are you sure he knows what he's doing? I shrugged. He's figuring it out. Neutral. Detached. Because doubt needed to grow naturally, not be forced. He stopped sleeping properly, started checking his phone constantly, reacting faster, thinking less. And that's when the mistakes multiplied. Because pressure doesn't break people immediately. It distorts their decisions first. And distorted decisions create visible consequences. Then it happened. The first major mistake. Public, loud, unavoidable. A deal he pushed aggressively collapsed. Not quietly. Messy. Money involved. Reputation involved. People involved. And this time, there was no explanation that worked. No adjustment that fixed it. No confidence that could cover it. For the first time, he looked at me and didn't ask for validation. He asked something else. Did I mess up? Silence. And for the first time, I didn't answer immediately, because this moment, had to land. Had to sink in, had to hurt. I looked at him, calm, measured, and said, "You made the decision." And just like that, the illusion cracked. Not shattered, cracked. And cracks spread. It didn't break all at once. That would have been too clean. Too merciful. No. His life unraveled the way it was built. Piece by piece, thread by thread on a until there was nothing left holding it together. And the worst part? He didn't see it happening. At first, it looked like pressure. Just pressure. The kind successful people brag about, late calls, tense meetings, missed dinners. He wore it like a badge. Because success had finally found him, and he wasn't about to question it. Not when the money was still coming in. Not when people still called him smart. Not when she still looked at him like he was rising. But pressure doesn't announce when it becomes collapse. It disguises itself as confidence, right up until the moment it turns into denial. The first crack? A deal. A big one. Too big. That's the kind he used to hesitate on, back when he still trusted his instincts. But not anymore. Now he trusted momentum. He trusted the version of himself he believed he had become. And most dangerously, he trusted that nothing could go wrong. It did. Quietly. At first. Numbers didn't align, payments delayed, partners started asking questions, then stopped asking entirely. That silence, that was the real warning. But his ego translated it differently. They're scared, he told himself. They don't understand the vision. So he doubled down. More money in, more risk, more exposure, because walking away would mean admitting something he couldn't afford to admit, that he didn't actually know what he was doing. And ego doesn't allow that. Ego convinces you to prove yourself, right before it destroys you. By the time reality hit, it wasn't a crack anymore, it was a collapse. The deal imploded, funds vanished, accounts froze. And suddenly, the same people who once praised him, Bob stopped answering his calls. Reputation doesn't shatter loudly. It fades, like a room slowly emptying, until you look around and realize you're alone. That's when the fear kicked in. Real fear. Not the kind you ignore. The kind that makes your decisions worse. Faster. Desperate. He started scrambling, pulling strings that were never strong enough to hold weight, calling favors that no longer existed, making promises he couldn't keep. Every move he made to fix things made them worse. Because fear doesn't stabilize you. It accelerates your fall. And she saw it. For the first time, she really saw him.
Not the confident man he pretended to be, not the rising figure she had started admiring, but something else, something fragile, something unraveling. It wasn't one moment, it was a shift, subtle but irreversible. The way he spoke changed. Less certainty, more defensiveness. The way he moved, restless, agitated. The way he looked at her, not as someone to impress anymore, but someone he needed to convince. That's when it broke. Not his finances, not his reputation, her perception. Respect doesn't disappear instantly. It erodes. And once it's gone, there's nothing left to stand on. Then came the night everything collapsed at once. He tried to fix it. Of course he did. With one last move, one last attempt to recover everything in a single play. A meeting. Late. Private. Desperate. He walked in believing he could still control the outcome. Walked out realizing he never could. The deal backfired. Publicly. Messily. Irreversibly. Accusations, blame, exposure. And just like that, everything he built turned against him. By morning, it was over. Money, gone. Reputation, destroyed. Trust, non-existent. And the silence? That silence came back. Only this time, it wasn't power. It was emptiness. He sat there, staring at what was left of his life, trying to understand where it went wrong. But he couldn't see it. Not yet. Because the same weaknesses that built his rise were now finishing his fall. Ego told him it wasn't over. Fear told him to act fast. Desperation made sure every decision buried him deeper. And somewhere in all of that, he finally ran out of options. There was only one place left to go. One person left who hadn't turned away. Me. He didn't knock like before. Didn't carry that quiet arrogance. Didn't walk in like he belonged. He hesitated, for the first time, then asked, "Can we talk?" And in that moment, right there, standing in front of me, broken, exposed, reduced to something unrecognizable, I realized something. I didn't destroy his life. I just removed the parts holding it together. The question came quietly, too quietly for everything that had just happened. "So what happens now?" She asked it without anger, without tears, without the emotion you'd expect after everything. Because something had shifted. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was thinking. And that was the moment I had been waiting for. Not the betrayal, not the fall. This. Awareness. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence settle. Let the weight of everything sit between us. Because the truth doesn't land if you rush it. "You want the honest answer?" She nodded. So I gave it to her. I knew. No reaction. Not at first. Just a pause. A stillness. The kind that comes right before everything rearranges itself in your mind. I knew from the beginning. Her eyes searched mine, not for denial, not for comfort, for confirmation. You watched it happen?" "Yes." That's when it hit. Not emotionally, psychologically, because betrayal hurts. But understanding it too late, that's what breaks you. "You didn't say anything." "No." "Why?" And there it was, the question that mattered. I leaned back slightly. Calm, controlled, exactly the way I had been from the start. "Because you were never the target." That landed differently. Confusion. Then realization. Starting to form. This wasn't about betrayal, I continued. It was about design. Now she was listening. Really listening. Everything he became, every opportunity he got, every step he took upward. I paused, just long enough. I gave it to him. Silence. Not disbelief. Not anymore. Because now, she was replaying everything. The introductions, the connections, the timing. Yet the way things always seemed to fall into place for him, too perfectly. You built him, yes. Just to tear him down? I shook my head slightly. No, that was important. I didn't tear him down. Another pause. I let him do that himself. That's when it clicked. Fully. The opportunities weren't traps. They were mirrors, each one designed to expose exactly who he was. Greedy, insecure, desperate. And when given just enough power, he amplified every flaw until it consumed him. Her voice dropped, softer now. So, all of this? Yes. Was planned? Every part that mattered. She looked away. Not at me. At him. Because now, she saw him clearly. For the first time. Not as a victim. Not as a rising man who fell. But as someone who was given everything. And still chose the worst possible version. Across the room. He finally understood it too. Not the details. Not the strategy. But the truth. Every step forward was never his, and every step downward was inevitable. He looked at me, not with anger, not with pride, but with something far heavier. Regret. You did this. I met his gaze, unmoved. No. That word hit harder than anything else I could have said. You did. And for the first time, he didn't argue. Because deep down, he knew. The greed, the shortcuts, the decisions, all of it was his. I just gave him the space to reveal it. The room went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't tension. It was clarity. Then she asked it. The final question. So what happens now? I stood, slowly, because the answer wasn't something I needed to explain. It was something they were already living. You move forward. I glanced at him. Yeah, then back at her, with whatever's left. No anger, no victory, no celebration. Because this was never about revenge, it was about control. And control doesn't need noise. I walked past them, toward the door, then paused. Just for a second, not to look back, but to leave them with one last truth. The difference between destruction and design, a slight pause, is patience. And then I left. By the time everything collapsed, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like silence, finally doing its job. No shouting, no confrontation, no dramatic reveal, just consequences, arriving exactly where they were supposed to. It started quietly. The business deal, his biggest one yet, fell through in a single afternoon. Not because of bad luck, because of doubt. Doubt planted months ago, in the right ears, at the right time. A question here, a hesitation there, a small inconsistency, exposed just enough to matter. Nothing obvious, nothing traceable, just enough to make people step back and say, something feels off. And that was all it took. Because men like him, they don't collapse from one blow. They collapse when the world stops believing in them. The calls stopped first, then the invitations, then the opportunities. And finally, the respect. That was the one he felt the most. Not the money, not the lifestyle, the respect. Gone. I watched it happen the same way I watched everything else. From a distance, uninvolved, untouched. He tried to recover. Of course he did. That was his nature. Loud, reactive, desperate to fix what he didn't understand. He blamed partners. He blamed timing. He blamed jealous people. He never blamed himself. That was always his weakness. And my wife, she stayed. At first. Not out of loyalty, out of confusion, because for the first time, she was seeing him clearly. Not the confident version, not the charming version, but the cracks, the arrogance, the insecurity, the way he handled pressure, the way he turned on people when things didn't go his way, the same traits I had been studying from the beginning, and the same traits I knew would destroy him, if left alone long enough. She tried to help him. That was the part that almost felt ironic. The same way she once tried to understand him. Now she was trying to save him. But you can't save someone from who they are. And slowly, that illusion broke too. The arguments started. Quiet at first, then louder. Then unavoidable. Not about me. Never about me. About him. His decisions, his failures, his inability to hold everything together, and the more he lost control, the more she pulled away. Until one day, she stopped defending him. And that was the moment it ended. Not the relationship, the belief. He lost everything after that. Not all at once, but completely. Money drained, reputation damaged beyond repair. And worst of all, people started talking. Not rumors, truth. The kind that spreads slowly and sticks permanently. And me? I was already gone. Not physically. That came later. But emotionally? I had left long before any of this began. Before the late-night conversations. Before the subtle distance. Before the first undeniable sign. I didn't leave when they betrayed me. I left when I understood them. That was the difference. They thought this was about revenge. It never was. Revenge is loud. Revenge wants to be seen. Revenge needs acknowledgement. What I didn't need any of that. Because I wasn't trying to hurt them. I was just done. The final conversation with my wife was the quietest part of all of this. No accusations, no anger, just clarity. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not the man she married, not the man she underestimated, but the man who had already moved on, while standing right in front of her. "You knew, didn't you?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't something I needed to prove anymore. I knew enough, I said, and that was all she needed. There were no tears. Not from me. From her, maybe. But even those felt different. Not grief, not love, regret, the kind that comes too late to matter. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need explanations, because closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from understanding. And I had already understood everything. I left without looking back, not because I was trying to be strong, but because there was nothing left worth seeing. And him? I heard about him. Months later. Not directly. Just pieces. Fragments. The way broken stories travel. He tried to rebuild. Failed. Tried again. Failed harder. Until eventually, he stopped trying. That's the thing about people like him. That they don't know who they are without the image they built. So when the image breaks, there's nothing underneath to hold them up. And just like that, it was over. No grand ending. No final confrontation. No moment where everything comes together in a dramatic explosion. Just silence, stillness, absence. The kind of ending that doesn't feel like an ending at all, but is. Sometimes I wonder if they ever realized it. If they ever looked back and saw the pattern, the timing, the way everything unfolded just a little too perfectly. But it doesn't matter. It was never about them realizing. It was about me finishing. Because by the time everything fell apart, I wasn't there anymore. Not in their lives, not in their story. I had already written my ending. They were just catching up to it. Wait, and the truth is, they thought they were making their own choices, following their own path, living their own story. They just didn't realize I was holding the pen,